I didn't know about that. It just took me 10 minutes to get around about to talk.
This is the lecture for your ancient and medieval history for Thursday, the 12th of May. Please make sure you have your notes out. And what we just saw was a clip from The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, the Battle of Minas Tirith, which showed a number of siege engines. You did not see Grand, the battering ram, that comes later in the battle. Basically, picture a giant log suspended by ropes from a bracket that has wheels on it. The wheels across the battlefield. It has a roof, so the guys inside are protected somewhat from attack from above. And they get up to a gate, and you swing the log back. It has a metal front. It looks scary and demonic. And whoop-boom, 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 and eventually it breaks through the gate, and you pull it back. What we did see were siege towers. Siege towers are also on wheels, which is a good idea. Star Wars ships are stupid in that they're not on wheels. They're on these slats. They land, and you can't move them around on the ground. Now, you want them on wheels. Yes?
Okay, so I guess this question would just be like your theory, because probably the ancient people wouldn't have wrote it down. But would they recover like the siege engines after a battle, or would it just be like way more trouble than it was worth to move them back to their like?
Oh, it depends entirely on what the situation of victory was. Yeah, no, sometimes they would just burn them.
Right.
Sometimes they would keep the city. If you got the city, you'd either keep them to protect the city. It all depended. But they were made of wood, and they were not intended to be long-term structures. So even if you preserve them, they're not going to last more than a few years before they just deteriorate from wood rot. Good question. So what a siege tower is designed to do, imagine that my feet are the wheels, and I go up to the wall, and I've got a ladder inside me, and troops are on the ladder, and there's a platform here. And let's say the wall's right in front of me. So when I get close enough to the wall, I go whomp, and there's a bridge that comes down like a drawbridge, smashing anyone in the way, and then the troops go, and they attack from the siege tower to the wall. And this is a way to get a lot of troops onto the top of the wall quickly. It's better than siege ladders, where you run up with a big ladder and go, beep, boom, and all the enemy has to do is go, beep, and then you're, whop, and dead. Lots of weird noises in sieges. The mangonels, or catapults, are Roman-style siege equipment. Basically, if you've ever seen a Roadrunner cartoon with Wile E. Coyote Super Genius, you've seen a catapult. It's this four-wheeled structure with what looks like a fly swatter, and you pull the fly swatter really far back, put a rock in it, and then let it go. And it hurls the rock, and it hits a target and smashes it. And this is designed to knock down city walls. It's not really an anti-personnel weapon, although if you're stupid enough or unfortunate enough to get caught in the path of the stone, you're going to die. Yeah?
Catapults are also amazing when you're at lunch. You have a plastic spoon and a small little berry, and you just bring it back.
There you go.
And shoot it.
Yes. My wife once observed a food fight at her college, the University of Southern Maine, back in the early 1980s. And basically there's this huge cafeteria room with these massive windows, and she's walking up, and she said it was like a fireworks display inside because of the flying jello of all colors, going hither and yon. I've seen food fights, but not like that.
There was one time at elementary school, it was like, those like sugar cookies.
Yeah.
Cookies, like they were old and expired though, and they gave them to us, so they were like hard as rocks.
Shurikens.
Yeah, it was like people were just trying to break them in half. Like, and this was like a room full of third graders. And some genius decided to stand up and chuck one against a wall to see if it would break it. It didn't. 30 other people started picking them up and just chucking them into walls, and someone got hit in the back of the head, and then immediately just it wasn't good.
Did he lose it and get angry and start attacking people, or did he not get knocked out and have a concussion from a cookie?
No, he just looked around because he looked down and saw a stale old cookie that hit him in the back of the head, and he was more confused than anything. And then
I can see that.
and someone came up and apologized to him for hitting him in the back of the head with the cookie, and he threw the Jello back at him.
Okay.
So it just devolved from there.
Yeah, this is why I don't teach elementary school, because I don't. Kids would fly through the air. Whee! Let's see if you can hit one kid with another in flight. They don't like that. Parents don't like that when you do that with your kids.
But you teach them physics.
Once. Anyway, the trebuchets, which I thought actually were shown better, and they weren't. What you've got is a big, tall structure, and you've got a wooden box filled with weight. I mean, just iron weight. And it's attached to a big strut. So one end of the strut has the weight. And the other end of the strut, here's the weight hanging from here. The other end of the strut has like a slingshot with your ammunition in it, whether it's pieces of city wall or whatever. These are fantasy trebuchets, so they're a bit larger than normal. Normally it's just a big rock. Anyway, you drop the weight, which brings this down really fast and brings this up really fast. But because there's a slingshot type thing on this end, it actually amplifies the throwing power. So this is going up, and there's a weight going whooping, and it gets shot out by like the sling effect on top. And it's longer range than a mangonel. It can throw a heavier weight than a mangonel. It is much more complicated than a mangonel. I never appreciated trebuchets until I had a student about 15 years ago who built one. It was about as tall as the ceiling of this room. It was still a miniature, obviously. And we got permission for him to bring it to school. And he hurled some small boulders at the forest. It was Maine. Lots of trees. And it was really cool. I mean, it was very impressive. Now, as I believe you've built one?
Yeah, it was like that big.
So what did you throw?
Like softballs and stuff.
Was it hard? The softballs thrown?
Yeah.
Would you want to get hit by one? No.
How fast was it?
Yeah.
I mean,
So how do you get injured? A softball in the head? Softball stuck in his head. Yeah, no, it would hurl it really fast, like a major league pitcher, I would think. Just super fast. So, okay. Anyway, I wanted you to see siege equipment. Now, let's go back to the Crusades. So, how can I put this? Venice and Genoa are both cities on the upper part of Italy. Genoa's here, Venice is here. So if you're traveling by sea to Europe, you go to Venice, and then you cross the Alps, and there you are. The Venetians did a lot of carrying of troops to the Crusades. Venice was a republic. Its chief official was called the Doge. And they were incredibly profit motive oriented. They wanted to make money. But the Venetians also wanted an empire. An empire of the islands of the Adriatic, an empire out into the Mediterranean Sea, and that meant conquering island fortresses. So, some enterprising Venetian admiral has a squadron of ships filled with a Crusader army. And he makes a proposal to the Crusaders. On your way to the Crusades, we'll pay you your passage plus some if on the way we can attack a few fortresses and take them for Venice. And the Crusaders say, yeah, sure, why not? So, a group of Crusaders who gathered to free the Holy Land from the infidel end up becoming mercenaries for the Venetian Republic. And they build the Venetian Republican Empire. They conquer some islands. They get some money. This is good. So, the purity of the motives of the Crusaders is beginning to tarnish just a bit. This is a little sleazy. This is not what the God-oriented people signed up for. This is less glorified and more just about gold. So then a group of these somewhat corrupted Crusader knights end up going to Constantinople. Now, Constantinople is a city with massive, massive, massive walls. And as a result, since the time of the Emperor Constantine, Constantinople, my tie has fallen partially apart, so I'm just going to get rid of part of it. Constantinople is a capital city that has never been sacked. That means all the wealth is there. Wealth that's built up by this point for 800 years, 900 years. That's a lot of wealth. So, having been welcomed into Constantinople as allies, the army of Crusader knights, somewhat tarnished by their experience with the Venetians, decides, why not? Let's go for it. And an army of Christian crusaders dedicated to serve God sacks the capital of the Christian empire in the East. This is horrible. This is not just sleazy. This is obscene. This is an abomination. But the Crusaders do it. And it's not like a gentle siege, like the Vandals, like the Ostrogoths did to Rome. This is more like the Vandals' siege of Rome. There's rape, there's murder, there's arson, there's theft, there's all sorts of horror stuff visited on Christian allies, not on Muslim enemies. And then they decide, we got what we want. Screw it, we're going home. So, this is bad. And this is a blow against the whole concept of crusading. Because this isn't at all good. This is clearly an abomination, a betrayal, an atrocity, a set of atrocities, an army of atrocity makers or war criminals. This is just really, really, really nasty. So, enter the idealists. We've made a mistake, a certain group of idealists say. We've been trying to fight holy war with holy war. We've been trying to fight against war with more war. No. No. That's not what we should do. Against war, we should wage peace. Peace. Yep. We're going to wage peace. We're going to send an army of love. So what they do, these idealists, these bright-eyed, shiny-eyed people, is they say, people are the most saintly when they have the innocence of children, when they're somewhere at or before puberty, before they're tarnished by sexual impulses. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the most beautiful, generous, gracious, lovely, wonderful children. And we're going to bring them from their families, probably buying them, because people often who are poor can't afford to raise their children. This is where you get legends like Hansel and Gretel. Hansel and Gretel were not just playing in the forest. Hansel and Gretel's parents brought them there because they couldn't feed them anymore. Hansel and Gretel were being left literally to the wolves. And instead they encountered the Black Forest Witch. But, man, this army of children of beautiful young people, of middle schoolers and younger, are true believers in this mission. We are going to wage a campaign of love, and we are going to melt the heart of the Saracen. And the children are brought aboard Venetian ships, Venice again, and they're blessed on their way. The moment the ships go over the horizon, away from their wild-eyed, idealistic sponsors, half the Venetian captains decide we're going to sell these kids in the slave markets of Tunis, which is an Islamic area that later houses the Barbary pirates, which is the first war we fight against anyone other than the British in the 1790s and early 1800s. The slave markets of Tunis and Algiers and the other North African cities that a lot of the Venetians bring these children to, you get a Caucasian child, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Christian child, especially one that has the sort of grace and charisma that these children were chosen for. They're going to sell for a lot of drachmas. And those that are actually brought to the Middle East are also sold into slavery. And the things that are done to these kids, I am not going to talk about in this class. Because this class, I will simply say, imagine the worst possible thing that sick adults can do to innocent children and increase it in intensity and duration until most of them just die. And even if they don't die physically, they certainly die inside. If you know anything about the victims of child sexual abuse, you know that there is a certain type of damage that is persistently nasty. Very few of these children ever return home, and those that do are not a good advertisement for what happened. So, the Children's Crusade. Between the Children's Crusade and the sack of Constantinople and the use of crusaders as Venetian mercenaries, people begin to, maybe this isn't a good idea. Furthermore, the Islamic armies are driving the Christians back to Acre, and ultimately they're going to lose Acre as well. So the Christians are driven out with the final unification of the Islamic world, and all told, the Crusades are there from the late 1000s until the early 1300s. So we're talking less than 200 years easily, probably fewer than 150 years in most cases. If you ever want to understand why the Arab world, so much of it anyway, why the Muslim world, so much of it anyway, is so persistently anti-Israel, it's because they see the state of Israel, the only Jewish nation in the world, the only democracy in the Middle East, the only westernized society not covered in trash in the Middle East, as a crusader state. And inshallah, God willing, they say, sooner or later, the Jews will be driven into the sea, and the Arabs and Muslims will reclaim Palestine. This is why, despite the many genuine peace offerings by the Israelis, so many in the Arab world are simply intransigent, unwilling to even contemplate peace, because they see Israel as a temporary thing that sooner or later God will find a way to pinch out. Now, every time the Arabs have tried to fight the Israelis, they've gotten their butts kicked badly, which is somebody who's pro-Israel I'm happy about. But there comes a point where In 2047, 2048, the 100th anniversary of the State of Israel, is Israel going to be there? In 2098, the 150th anniversary, is Israel still going to be there? In 2148, is Israel still going to be there for its bicentennial? The Arabs really believe that sooner or later, inshallah, that means God willing, the Jews will be driven out. And their reason for this is because the Crusaders were driven out. It's just a matter of time. And that, to me at least, explains the bad faith that so many Arab negotiators negotiate with, and the unreasonableness that I've seen on the Arab side. No doubt there are people who have different points of view. It's a controversy. But look at the history, and look at the history of peace negotiations. And if you're honest, I think you will notice some interesting things worth your consideration. So, why did people do it? Why did people engage in crusades in the Middle East? And by the way, crusading continues in Europe after the Middle East. For what? For what purpose? Well, remember, crusades are inspired by Islamic jihad. What does someone get for dying shaheed in a holy war, for dying as a jihadi, a holy warrior? What reward does an Islamic holy warrior get? We've gone over this many times. I know you know.
72 virgins, and they get to be in one of the nicer neighborhoods of Arab or Muslim heaven.
That's right. And that's not bad. That's a pretty good reward for heterosexual young men from the desert. So, is a Christian church going to ever promise something like that? Hell no. No. You don't have Catholic priests and nuns talking about any number of sex kittens that God is going to provide you in the afterlife. That is not the description of heaven that Christians usually have anything, in common with. So what is going to be given instead? Well, I know you know.
Yeah.
I'm asking somebody other than you both, because you both know, what might a crusader be given? Might he be offered? We actually covered this at the beginning of the year.
Salvation.
Right. And salvation, if you're a true believer, ain't nothing. Salvation's a pretty big deal. So, the medieval concept of heaven and hell and the afterlife is tripartite. There are three areas. Those people who are truly saintly in life go to heaven, go straight to heaven, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Those people who are truly scummy, evil, lousy, rotten, wastes of space, jerks, they go straight to hell. But most of us are neither devils or angels in human flesh. Most of us are shades of gray. So we go to purgatory. And in purgatory, we work off our sins. And when our soul is enlightened from the burdens of sin sufficiently, it ascends to heaven by God's grace. Now, how is it worked off? Well, imagine being at the Department of Motor Vehicles, which some of you have been, and waiting in line and waiting in line and waiting in line, and then realizing you're in the wrong line. So you got to go back to another line and start over again. And then you did the paperwork wrong, so you got to go back and start over again. Imagine a world of absolute frustration and tedium and just obnoxiousness. It's not quite devils sticking pitchforks in your tender parts while you're burning in a lake of sulfur evermore. Now, it's not quite like that. That's hell. But it's bad. And you're there for like 100,000 years because time is different in the afterlife. So imagine being in that situation with no breaks, with no ability to take a rest, no ability to go to a restaurant or have fun or go swimming or go home or whatever for 100,000 years. Well, crusaders are given dispensation. Now, that dispensation may be 50,000 years off your time in purgatory. It might be 10,000 years off your time in purgatory. It might be 5,000 years off your time in purgatory, but it's time off from purgatory. And if you are really, really, really specially blessed, or if the Pope really, really, really wants to reward you, you will get an indulgence, which is total dispensation from all your sins. You are paying off your sins by crusading, and you go straight to heaven. It's not 72 wish versions, but it is something of value to Christians. So if your life is in real lousy shape, which everyone's is at one time or another, you're all going to wish you were, it's just bad. It just happens. Everyone has depressed moments. Everyone. And one thing you've got to hopefully understand is they're temporary moments. They pass. They're not. You're not seeing the truth when you're totally miserable. You really aren't. You're seeing things about as rightly as you would in the happiest moment of your happiest day of your happiest life. That's not seeing things truly either. When you're super happy, it colors everything. When you're super miserable, it colors everything. It's distortion. It's like you're looking through a lens that's not your prescription, and suddenly everything is blurry or worse. Purgatory, time off, heaven. And what if you're not a man? What if you're not healthy? What if you're not young? What if you're crippled? What if you're rich? What if you're a woman? What if? Can you do anything that might be like crusading, I guess? We talked about this. Summer, moved your hand. What might a person contribute who is not able to put on the armor and go there themselves?
You could beat the armor.
Summer. Because I'm evil. What might a person contribute to a crusade other than their service? What even now can be done if you care about something? What can you give?
Support.
In what form? You're right. What form of support can you give to help people who need to travel, who need weapons, who need armor? Say it louder.
Money.
Like you mean it.
Money.
Money! Right.
We don't show money now.
Money. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Money!
Good. That's right. Trump would be pleased. So. Thank you. Thank you for that. That was fun. The idea of crusading vicariously through monetary contributions, in other words, paying for crusaders' gear or their travel or their food or whatever, begins to gain currency in Christian circles. Okay, so you take your life savings, whatever it happens to be, and you give it to a crusade. Shouldn't the church recognize that sacrifice? Shouldn't the church give you something in return? Yeah. So what the church begins to do is to give what is called an indulgence. Now, an indulgence is a sheet of paper. And remember, most people can't read or write, so written paper is a pretty magical thing. It's like you're being given a magic note. And it's a get out of purgatory free card or a get out of 50,000 years of purgatory card. Depending upon your contribution, you might get 10 years off purgatory or 100 years of purgatory or 1,000 years off purgatory or 10,000 or more. But it doesn't have to be for you. It could be for your grandpa. It could be for your crazy Uncle Fritz. It could be for anyone. So think about Christian love and generosity. You give of your stuff to buy an indulgence for another person. That's a charitable deed. That will hold you in good stead when Judgment Day comes. So buying indulgences starts, and it all comes from the idea that you are actually crusading vicariously. You are crusading at a distance. You are crusading with your money, not your blood, not your flesh. And this is one of the things that's going to characterize the late medieval and early modern church, and it's going to cause, in part, the Protestant Reformation. Because this is perilously close to buying your way into heaven. And the truth is, and I know a lot of people are going to get angry at this, God does not need your money. He's God. He's not saving up for something he can't buy yet without your help. God is omnipotent, omniscient. And if he needed wealth, not that he would, because God, he'd do something. Now, does that mean that you shouldn't do charitable works? No, absolutely. Christians should find things to do that are charitable works. But God doesn't need your money. But in the late Middle Ages and early modern times, the buying and selling of indulgences became such a big deal. For some people, it became at the heart of their worship. And there's something off about that for most Christians today, even Roman Catholics. But it all comes from this crusading thing. Now, what's another benefit of crusading? Booty! Yep, booty. And booty is gold and silver and gemstones and objects to art and other things like silks, spices, and slaves, I guess. You don't want slaves. You're a Christian. You free them. But servants. It's the stuff you get from winning battles. Yep. Booty time. So, it does not mean what it comes to mean in the 1970s disco era. It does not mean just what some of you are snickering at. It means the stuff you get from plundering your defeated victims or enemies. That's booty. I once had a Dungeons and Dragons player in one of my games who specialized in the skill looting, because they didn't just loot like an amateur. This guy could go through somebody's stuff and somebody's house, and they knew all the tricks, where people would hide things, hidden chambers, trapdoors, secret panels in your clothing. He had a booty skill of like 5, which was 5 skill ranks. That improves your chances by at least 20%. So, in any event, that's what he was there for. He was there for the booty. Yes?
Skyrim, if you max your pickpocketing level, you can just take people's clothes off without their knowing.
Yeah, Skyrim's a little weird that way. Personally, I think you should have to shout to do something like that. Foos, no clothes! But that isn't... No, you're right. I never max out pickpocketing. Now, I do max out lockpicking, because I like breaking into things. But I'm usually a swordsman in Skyrim.
You can cheese your way to getting max level by paying the woman to teach you pickpocketing.
Oh, yeah.
Pickpocketing the money back and then paying her again.
Does that work?
It does.
Do they let you do that?
Yeah, it does.
Oh, that's cheap. That's funny. That's hilarious. That makes me... Okay. I have no idea. Now, there are other benefits too, and I'm going to talk about them. I just want to make sure they're not right up ahead. The good life. The good life. Europeans are living at a certain low-tech level. Okay, they've got woolen and linen long johns. They've got drafty castles that are dank, and not in the good way. They've got boring food, turnips and butter and beer and bread and lots of other bee things that are brown or some variant of it. The Middle East has spices that come from all over the world. So you can have chilies, you can have curries, you can have all sorts of tasty foods that you can't get anywhere else in Europe. But spices aren't just for num 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 num. Spices are also medicine. A European gets sick. They sound like that. They go to a barber surgeon, and The barber surgeon is going to engage in what is called leechcraft.
Ew, no.
Yeah, leechcraft.
That helps.
So it's because they believe in the philosophies of Galen, which says there are 4 basic fluids in the body. They're called humors. There's black bile, there's yellow bile, there's phlegm, and there's blood. I think that's the 4th. And there's an imbalance of bad humors. So too much blood. So what do? Well, you, with a scalpel, slice open a vein, not an artery, it's important, a vein, and you stick a leech on it. It just sucks out the bad humors, and when the leech is disgorged, you it off and you put another leech on. And you do this for days until the person gets better. Now, a modern person with modern understandings of biology and medicine and healing and common sense would say, taking someone's blood while they're sick is not going to make them better. It's going to actually weaken them. And it does. But they don't see it that way. They see it as an excess of humors that needs even more leeches. So you could have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 leeches on you at once in different places on your body. Not good. Yes.
What do they do if you have too much of the black bile? Because isn't that like from your spleen? How do they get
I
that
have
out?
no clue, honestly. I know they're really good at getting rid of the blood.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, they send a guy in, punch you in the spleen, and you end up vomiting. I have no idea, honestly. You should look that up. That would be a good question. What do you do with an excess of the black bile humor? Question mark. And watch Siri go, you're on a terrorist watch list now.
I'm sure I already am.
So,
You're like, no,
it's good to have
Yeah.
ambitions in life. It really is. So, spices are also medications. Now, the medieval people in Europe did have herbalism. They did have an understanding of how different herbs and minerals can affect the body. But the Arabs, they've got a better idea. Really, in most cases, Arab medicine is cleaner. It's much. Our medicine is based on Arab medicine, not medieval stuff from Europe. So spices includes food spices. It includes medicine. It also includes things like soap. You know, soap is not a big deal until you are without it. You try keeping clean without some form of soap. So soaps, spices, soaps, hot baths. Again, you might not think much of hot water showers or baths until you're stuck camping for weeks, in which case you want to get clean, you dip yourself in the stream, and it's cold. And I knew guys who, when they were younger, served in the military in places where they didn't have hot water for showers. So what they did is they took cold water showers. They were lucky to get fresh water for showers because they usually would use salt water. And the thing about cold water showers is, try it sometime. It's not that fun. I mean, you'll wake up really quickly.
That's what you're supposed to do when you get a sunburn. You gotta take a cold water shower.
Oh, that's
and
awful.
ice bath.
Oh, I've been sun poisoned.
Put aloe on.
Okay, so aloe helps right after. You have to be out of the sun for aloe to work though. Taking a cold shower will help the redness, the itching, and the burning go down.
Cold showers make your blood
Well, yeah,
flow
I've
more.
heard-
That's
I
why
know,
they
like,
like make
I
you
use
wake up.
ice.
I like
Yeah.
them in the morning sometimes. 'Cause it
Well, no,
gives you
sometimes
more-
it's a good way of just meeting the day. But I'll tell you, when you have no choice but to have a cold water, salt water, no. So the hot baths are a big deal. Silks, we've already talked about. The thing about silks is they're cool in the summer. Okay, you can sweat, but they let air pass through. They let your flesh get chilled, and it's nice. And in the wintertime, silk will also cut the wind and keep out nasty cold. So silk is light, it's comfortable, and it's cool in the summer and warm in the winter. It's also incredibly tough. It's very strong. If you have a rope made of silk, that's going to be a strong, strong rope. Long distance communication is something that Crusaders get used to. They're in Palestine, they're in Israel, they're near Jerusalem, and yet they're writing back and forth to England or northwest France. So for the first time in the Middle Ages, long distance communication becomes a big deal. And books. There are libraries in the East with books that have been long ago lost by the West. And some of the Crusader knights are educated men. Some of them really, really want to learn things. And the ancients wrote about war, and they wrote about siege. They wrote about siegecraft. They wrote about how battles were fought and won. And so, in the late Middle Ages, a number of things from ancient tactics and ancient approaches to war came back to war because of books that Crusaders got a hold of. Gadgets. Imagine that you have lousy eyesight, either from the beginning or because you get older. Now, you know that if you have a magnifying glass, you can see objects better. Why not put magnifying glass type lenses on hoops with a hinge that you put on the top of your nose, and you can read, and you don't have to hold a magnifying glass. And this is the basis of these silly things I'm wearing that some of you are wearing. Eyeglasses. Again, it's a humble thing, unless you're without them. And no, they didn't have contacts. By the way, I can't stand contacts. The very idea creeps me out. I'm blind in one eye, so I've got to really, really keep careful my good eye. And the thought of putting something on my eyeball, forget about it. No. I'll wear glasses, thank you much. Very much. But there are gadgets like this, and there are rarities from the East. You've got porcelain, So, the Crusaders get a taste for all of this good life stuff. And even when they get kicked out of the Middle East, they wants it, my precious. They wants it back. And often the Crusaders come back to Europe with enough money. So what they have is what's called Enlightened Self-Interest. They want the good life. So this is going to spark the first real long-distance trade since the fall of Rome. Crusader knights in Northwest Europe, in Germany and France and England, want the silks and the spices and the gadgets and the medicine and the knowledge and the books. And they trade with Genoa and Venice and a bunch of other cities in North Italy. So they go by land to North Italy and then by sea to Cairo in Egypt and Damascus in Syria. And they are going to start... do any of you know how to get gas out of a person's car by siphoning it? It's, by the way, illegal. Don't do it. And it doesn't taste good if you don't know what you're doing. Back in the 70s, we learned about this, though. It is illegal. You take a hose, you put it into a water source, or in this case, a gas tank. You've got to then prime it. You've got to get suction started. So you've got to go, which is not fun with gas fumes, by the way. And then you get a little gas in your mouth, and you go, and you hopefully pull away from the siphon quickly enough so that the flow continues.
It's okay to get a little bit of gas in your mouth. Gas is actually not that
A little bit, sure, but you don't want to swallow it.
It's you know you can overdose on salt way easier than drinking gasoline.
Yeah, don't do either. Don't do either of those things.
Ethanol, which is why people drink it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, look, dumb-bottomed people swallow Tide Pods because I have a video of me swallowing a Tide Pod. Why did he die? Because he wanted to make a really cool video. Anywho, so the desire of Crusaders for the good life after they return to Europe is going to be the suction on the siphon of long-distance trade. And it's going to produce a whole bunch of good effects. So the Crusades' long-term effect is to revive long-distance trade. Now, I'll tell you more about other Crusades and so forth next time. Any questions? Okay, we're done. Thank you. Come again.
She's gonna die.